Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club right now. For just $2 a week, you can join with other English learners, practice speaking, have conversations, enjoy yourself, and use new vocabulary. We run conversation clubs every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m, 6 p.m, and 9 p.m. UK time. So there's no excuse. You can join, and you should join right now. Join the Thinking in English Conversation Club, link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. Socrates is considered to be one of the founders of Western philosophy and thought. Today, I want to look at his ideas and approach to asking questions, and then see if there are any lessons language learners like us can learn from Socrates. You can find the full transcript of today's episode on the Thinking in English blog. The link is in the description. Check out my YouTube channel and Instagram page, both called Thinking in English Podcast. Leave a like, rating and review wherever you are listening right now. Join my conversation club to improve your English. And here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. To question. To question. To express doubts about the value or truth of something. As in, results from a study questioned whether treatment with the drug really improves survival. To examine. To examine. To consider a thing carefully and in detail in order to discover something. For instance, the council is to examine ways of reducing traffic in the city centre. Contradiction. Contradiction. The fact of something being the complete opposite of something else or very different from something else, so that one of them must be wrong. For example, you say you're good friends, and yet you don't trust him. Isn't that a contradiction? Ignorance. Ignorance. Lack of knowledge, understanding, and information about something. For example, public ignorance about the disease is still a cause for concern. Dialectical. Dialectical. Discovering what is true by considering opposite theories. For example, contradiction is, after all, what dialectical thinking is all about. Assumption. Assumption. Something that you accept as true without question or proof. As in, people tend to make assumptions about you when you have a disability. Preconception. Preconception. An idea or opinion formed before enough information is available to form it correctly. For instance, try to go into the meeting without too many preconceptions about what the other group wants. A few weeks ago, I wrote an episode on Stoicism and English learning. Despite dating from 2,000 years ago, during the age of the Roman Empire, the ancient philosophy of Stoicism has recently experienced a resurgence in popularity. Its focus on self-discipline, self-control, and personal motivation has found it a place in the 21st century. As someone who enjoys reading philosophy and discussing the ideas of philosophers, and more importantly, has found the lessons from philosophy personally useful in my own life, I decided to make an episode applying some lessons from Stoicism to English learning. And it was a really popular episode. I had so many lovely messages from all of you guys listening, and requests for similar episodes with other schools of thought and famous philosophers. After spending a few days reading through my old notebooks, where I recorded and wrote down my old readings and ideas on philosophy, I decided there would be no better place to start than with one of the founders of Western philosophy, Socrates. Today I'll talk about the life of Socrates before discussing his main philosophical ideas and contributions. Then I will try to use some of Socrates' ideas to give everyone listening some tips and advice for your English learning journey. Socrates is a remarkable historical figure. He is considered to be the founding father of Western philosophy. His Socratic method is still widely used, and he is known for being one of the first people in recorded history to use an inductive argument, an approach that was refined by Aristotle and later used by Francis Bacon at the beginning of Western science. The name Socrates is known around the world, and he is often placed as one of the wisest people in all of history. Yet, Socrates himself never wrote any philosophy. He left no books, essays, writings, or notes. He established no school of philosophy. He had no theories or unique ideas of his own. And he was sentenced to death in ancient Athens for corrupting the youth of the city with his ideas. Our knowledge of Socrates comes only from mentions of him in other Greeks' writings. He became a well-known figure and famous person in Athens and had many followers. It is from one of these followers, the incredibly influential philosopher Plato, who wrote about Socrates in his dialogues Apology, Phaedo, and the Symposium, that we gained most of our understanding of Socrates. So, who was Socrates, and what do we know about him? It is believed that Socrates was born in Athens in the year 469 BCE. He was the son of a stonemason and a midwife, and it is likely he followed his father into stonemasonry as well as studying philosophy, before serving in the Athenian army during the Peloponnesian War. After his father died, Socrates inherited enough money to live without needing to work. He spent the rest of his life engaging in philosophical discussions around the city. I'll talk more about his approach to philosophy in a second, but in short, it was not his philosophical ideas that were revolutionary, but the questions he asked and the way he asked them. Socrates' insistence on asking questions developed into a new way of thinking, a way of thinking that involved questioning and examining everything we think. This approach to thinking was labelled as dangerous to society. Socrates was accused of arguing for the sake of deception, and he was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth of Athens with untraditional ideas. Although he was offered the choice of being exiled away from Athens, Socrates instead pleaded guilty to corrupting the youth, and was killed by hemlock poisoning in the year 399 BCE. As I've mentioned, Socrates' major contribution to the history of philosophy was not a radical new idea or school of thought. Instead, it was his approach to gaining knowledge, learning, and questioning everything that was revolutionary. Before Socrates, the philosophers of ancient Greece were seeking answers and explanations to some of the most complicated and troubling problems, like the origin of the universe. But this was not what concerned Socrates. Instead, he was primarily interested in examining people's lives and beliefs. Hence the famous quote, "The life which is unexamined is not worth living." Socrates believed everything should be questioned. He would question the essential concepts that are known and used every day, and try to reveal their true meaning and the contradictions in their meanings and the contradictions in our societies. For example, he was one of the first philosophers to question the meaning of a good life. People have always been searching for how to live this kind of good life. And for Socrates, it meant to do the right thing and achieve a peaceful mind. He did not accept that ideas like good and evil were relative concepts, different for everyone. Instead, he believed that there is only one good, knowledge, and only one evil, ignorance. As knowledge is the only true good, and if we want to lead a good life, we must be constantly learning, questioning, and examining ourselves and everything we think we know. For Socrates, the purpose of life was not getting rich or successful, but it was knowledge. The reason we exist is to learn and gain knowledge. Socrates' dialectical method. The dialectical or Socratic method is one of Socrates' most influential contributions. At its basic level, it is a relatively simple approach to asking questions, to reveal false assumptions and mistakes that the claims are based on. It is known as the dialectical method because it is based on a dialogue or a discussion between two different and opposing views. The idea is that by asking and answering questions from opposing perspectives, we can activate our critical thinking and understand the presumptions and preconceptions that our ideas are based on. The aim is not to find the truth, but to find the problems and inconsistencies in other people's arguments. There is a very famous story concerning Socrates and his dialectic method. The priestess of Apollo was asked who is the wisest person in Athens, and she responded that there was no one wiser than Socrates. Socrates couldn't believe this. He believed he was ignorant, so how could he be wise? He went to all of the most knowledgeable and intelligent people in Athens to find someone who was wiser than him, and therefore disprove the priestess of Apollo. During his discussions, he realized that even the most knowledgeable people in Athens would, under questioning, reveal that their knowledge was limited or wrong. Socrates entered these conversations from a position of ignorance. He took the position of someone who knows nothing, and would therefore question every assumption and point. Rather than engaging and arguing, he would question, because he was interested in their knowledge, in the other people's knowledge. And then Socrates realized that the priestess of Apollo was correct. He was the wisest man in Athens, but not because he was the most knowledgeable, but because he understood the limits of his own knowledge and he claimed to know nothing. He was the wisest man because he knew nothing. He realized that being wise was understanding your own ignorance and the preconceptions in your own thinking. Here is another example of the Socratic method I found while reading. Imagine you are in Athens, ancient Athens, and like most Athenians, you believed in a all-knowing set of Greek gods, right? Like Zeus and Apollo, you believed in Greek gods. Socrates may ask you, do you believe the gods know everything? And you might say, yes, they are gods. Of course they know everything. Socrates may then ask, do the gods ever disagree with each other? And as an ancient Greek, you would answer yes. The gods are constantly fighting with each other and arguing all the time. And if you ever read any Greek mythology, you would know that the Greek gods constantly fight. Socrates would then ask, if the gods are fighting and arguing, they must be disagreeing about what is true and right. And you would probably respond by saying, yes, I guess they do disagree. Socrates would then say, this must mean the gods can be wrong sometimes, meaning that they can't know everything. This was just a simple example of the dialectical method, By asking questions from a position of ignorance, you are able to reveal the false assumptions that underlie our own ideas and concepts. For example, the gods must know everything. But if the gods are fighting and disagreeing with each other, it means they must be wrong sometimes, which therefore means they can't know everything all of the time. The purpose of Socrates' conversations is not necessarily to find the truth, right? It's not to find the truth. But the purpose is the conversation itself, to find insights in the ideas, assumptions, and the contradictions held by people. Now I've given you a very brief and simple introduction to the life and philosophy of Socrates. What lessons can English learners gain from Socrates' ideas? I think there are a few. First, practice asking questions. Socrates believed that asking questions was one of the best ways to learn and understand. In fact, he is reported to have said that I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. By asking and answering questions, you are learning. And Socrates knew that by asking his students questions, he was encouraging them to think for themselves. I believe questioning is one of the most undervalued skills by English learners. I've even recorded episodes about the importance of asking questions. Ask questions, and especially question your own assumptions, and you will begin to notice changes in your English ability. You can improve your language skills by asking questions of native speakers, teachers, and even yourself. By asking questions, you can clarify your understanding of grammar, vocabulary, and usage. Number 2, learn through dialogue. Socrates believed that learning happens best through dialogue and discussion. The Socratic method, which involves asking questions and engaging in dialogue, is a reflection of Socrates' belief in the value of dialogue and discussion as a means of learning. For Socrates, learning is not possible without such discussions. And the same could be true for English learning. Having conversations is a great way to learn and practice. You can practice your language skills by engaging in conversation with native speakers, classmates, or language exchange partners. If you are struggling to find a conversation partner, join my conversation club. We encourage our members to ask questions and examine everything. 3. Embrace your mistakes. Socrates believed that making mistakes was an essential part of the learning process. In fact, it was the core part of his approach. He asked questions to find the contradictions and mistakes in all knowledge. He was looking for mistakes. Once he found these mistakes, he believed he was better able to understand meaning. And this is true for learning a language. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. Instead, find your mistakes. Work out what mistakes you make. Once you can identify your inaccuracies and your common problems, you can use it as an opportunity to improve and practice. Keep an open mind. Socrates is reported to have said, "I am the wisest man alive, for I know one thing, and that is that I know nothing." Socrates emphasized the importance of understanding your own ignorance, of questioning assumptions, and of keeping an open mind. While studying, you may encounter new ideas and perspectives as you engage with the language and cultures. By keeping an open mind and questioning those assumptions, you can deepen your understanding of English and the people who speak it. And finally, never stop learning. As I mentioned earlier, Socrates saw a good life as being intimately connected with knowledge. To lead a good life for Socrates, you must always be learning. Once you stop questioning and looking for knowledge, you may become ignorant. Language learning is a lifelong pursuit. There will always be new words, new collocations, new abbreviations, and new sentence patterns to learn. So keep learning and keep looking for new knowledge. So here is today's final thought. Socrates was one of the founders of Western philosophy. His approach to asking questions and questioning the fundamentals of society ultimately caused him to be executed. But it has influenced the past 2,000 years of European philosophy. Socrates' commitment to learning and questioning has many important lessons that could be used by English learners and speakers. Embrace your mistakes, never stop learning, keep an open mind, and ask questions. What did you think of this episode? And who is your favourite philosopher? What philosopher or school of philosophy would you like me to cover next in this series of English learning and philosophy? But thank you for listening today, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.